Hey, everybody. Happy June. It is Friday, June 7th, and you are live on Shally's Alley. Woohoo! I need party streamers or something. Well, on with me today, we have a very special guest and longtime friend um, from way back in the day.
Way back.
Uh, in fact, I'm gonna embarrass you with a little story. Uh, Susie is one of the few people that have actually come to my house. And a long time ago, uh, I had just my daughter had just been born, and Susie came by and brought a gift for my daughter that was a wiry looking little black poodle kind of stuffed animal, but it was called the Webkins, and it was the first internet experience for my kid because I had this puppy that had a login code to an online club where the Webkins can play together with other Webkins and stuff like that. So I want to say she was like maybe 3 or something.
Yeah,
Um, and
boy.
like literally, you are responsible for my daughter getting on the internet. It's
Oh
all
my
your
gosh,
fault.
that's
Just
crazy.
went downhill from there.
Uh, she's probably how old now? I mean, okay.
Yeah, she's 16,
Oh boy,
about to go 17 this December. So
nice.
yeah,
Well, I
long time.
remember when you lived in Arizona.
Yep, that's how
That's
long we known each other.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that was 98, 99,
yeah,
2000,
yeah, around
something
there,
like
yeah,
that.
for
Yeah,
sure. So yeah, we've been around the block a little bit.
I've been around the block for a little bit, but the reason that I wanted to bring on the show today, not that of course we're longtime friends, but folks might be wondering, well, what's the topic of the day? Well,
Yeah,
the topic of the day is career transition. So here's the deal. Susie used to be, well, still is, I guess, a really good sourcer. And back in the day, we're talking about, like, as we just discussed, we're talking about 2000, right? So 24, 25 years ago, maybe
yeah,
even 26 years ago, when the
yeah.
internet was like a little baby and just had diapers, and somebody had just plugged in the internet and put fresh batteries in it or whatever. And since then, Susie and I's career kind of just evolved into this, internet sleuthing, find anyone online. And throughout the years, we both developed an affinity for something that is nowadays called competitive intelligence. Even so much as to say, I don't know about you, but I joined SKIP, the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals.
I did for a while.
Yeah, me too. Exactly. I was a member of SKIP for a while. And anyway, getting around to the point, Susie actually made a full on career transition. So has essentially gone into computer competitive intelligence or internet competitive intelligence, or I guess you also do telephone competitive intelligence, but the whole thing. No,
No,
just internet. Okay.
yeah.
So just internet competitive intelligence. So this is a pretty big career move. And I just wanted to have you on the show to explore, for those of you that are out there that maybe you've been in sourcing for a little while and you're like, this isn't for me, but I want to use these skills. Or maybe you're just having a really tough time finding a job in this market,
Yeah.
and you want to apply yourself to something else. Competitive intelligence is probably the closest role to sourcing that you can have in a corporate entity, and
Right.
most people have no idea what it is. So I wanted you to kind of explain a little bit about what competitive intelligence is today, and um, how you got into it. I mean, I know you and I were both into it because we were sourcing, and it
Mhm.
was a way to learn for sourcing, but you decided to actually just jump ship. So, kind of how that whole thing happened. So, why don't we start with what, for folks that have no idea what it is, what is competitive intelligence?
So competitive intelligence within a company normally actually falls under marketing and product marketing. So you are assisting teams, the field, the sales, the marketing team. I don't really interact with talent acquisition anymore, to be honest.
Right,
That's another
right.
story. So yeah, so I am like tasked with finding. out like as soon as possible. What our competitors are up to, what are their new product releases, what are they, where are they, what where are they placing themselves online. And so I go back to my team and provide this information, and so that the product management, project management, and engineering teams can actually make some decisions around things that I find. I mean, I'm not like the person that influences like a new product, but I do help in giving shining a light on what other companies are doing. Which, by the way, I have two major competitors doing their summits, their annual summits, one this week and one next week.
Right now.
So yeah, so I am tracking everything that's being announced. What are the analysts saying? Also going through all the LinkedIn updates and Twitter updates and Reddit threads, and um, just to understand, maybe this company, I'm not going to name them, but
Right, right, right.
saying the greatest things about their products, where on the other side, reality hits under Hacker News, or as I said, Reddit, and people are
Right.
actually saying, well, no, but this, this is fluff or whatever. So I take all that, and it's a lot. So you have to distill it, and then, in a presentable format, back to whoever's requesting that. And I get requests from, I mean, from the CEO down to engineering, and again, no HR. I don't even
Right.
interact with them anymore. So it's really
So
cool. I love it.
it's kind of like, in a way, it is the same thing as sourcing, because you're trying to identify who does what, where, at
Yes,
what companies, and who they are, and now you're essentially doing what it is, right, that
exactly.
they do, and it's
Right.
not so much as the who, but the what they're doing, what they're
Exactly.
about to do, so you can kind of get ahead. So competitive intelligence is a, and I want to emphasize one thing here. To you and I, it is natural, it comes organically, but to a lot of people out there, this may be, maybe an alien environment. I want to emphasize that this is all 100% ethical and above board. It is
Absolutely.
a legitimate, there's this confusion about corporate espionage or whatever. So whatever you see in the movies, it's not that. This is a legitimate, essentially a research job
Correct.
that, sometimes folks come into this field from what, like library sciences or marketing or business
Mhm.
intelligence, BI, marketing intelligence, and then they evolve into this role that's more proactive as opposed to reactive.
Right.
It's not finding out what happened, but like hopefully trying to get ahead of it, right?
Exactly.
So it's very similar to what I still do and what you used to do with people,
Yep.
but it's a completely different market, different environment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And probably 80-90% of the information is actually available to practically anyone. It's just a matter of finding it, how to finding it, and as you said, synthesizing it and putting it together into something that actually tells a story.
That was
But
story.
is there a component of what you do that is not, let's just say, openly available, like on the internet? Is there anything that you do where you gather information from, let's say, paid sources that you have access to, that that you legally and ethically have access to, but we don't, or
Uh, yes. Well, there is
anything
a
like
tool.
that?
We do use a paid tool. It's actually called Crayon. Very, very cool tool. They pull in all the feeds available, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff you can do in there, like track. Oh, and I have to create battle cards as well. That's another thing that's part of my job description. So where do we
Oh,
win? Where do we lose? When do we walk away? What are the objections? And all that. So Crayon is really cool because it when you do these battle cards, they're live, and they sit in Salesforce, which is where the salespeople live. So that's really cool. And then there's win loss analysis. You go around again. I interact a lot with salespeople,
with
which
sales,
I love.
right?
They're cool. They're fun, and
They're telling you what went down with the
exactly.
client meeting, and if they got the deal, what was the turning point? If they didn't get the deal, what was the objection? Things like that.
You got it. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's part of the job. So yeah, Crayon is a paid tool. It's been really
So
good.
Crayon would be like what we used to do with our CRM, where we like put all the, except
Mhm.
it seems like it has analytics and
Yeah.
visualization and
It
yeah.
actually shows you who's actually read and downloaded the battle cards and if they want a deal. So that's really cool, right? To
Oh
kind of
wow,
connect the dots.
wish we could
Um,
do that in sourcing.
I know, right? And then
Who's
there's
interviewed the candidate, and if they got the hire,
hello.
you
There
would
you go.
think it'd be in the ATS, but no, it's not.
Right?
Do
Yes.
you even
Um,
remember ATSs? You're probably, oh, I'm so glad I'm done with that part of the world.
oh my God. Yeah. Not even gonna go there. But by the
Worst
way, I
software
didn't
ever.
just like fall into competitive intelligence from sourcing. So I've been at Cloudera for now 8+ years. So I was on board before it was a public company, and then it became public, and then it merged with Hortonworks, and then it was sold, and then we went private again. So I've seen a whole bunch of stuff going on, layoffs, etc. Initially, when I wanted to get out of talent acquisition, was I saw something called the Innovation Accelerator that was being started at Cloudera. I'm like, what the heck is that? That sounds awesome. And so I found the person who was heading this endeavor, and he brought me in as a program manager, which I had never done program management.
Right, right,
I
right.
just said, listen, these are the things I know how to do. And he goes, okay,
And
so
that sounds like a program manager,
and I was like,
you're like,
program.
really? That's a program Yeah.
So for a whole year, I
Yep.
was totally embedded with engineers, man. I was like doing all the scrum calls, all that stuff, which I had never done before. So it's like you have to kind of like, um, kind of jump in. And for sure, I had what is that term again? Imposter syndrome.
Oh
It's like,
yeah, I still
I
have
don't know
that.
what I'm doing,
I still,
man.
today I still get it.
But with me, and I'm sure with a lot of sources, because first thing you gotta have is curiosity and then
Yeah.
perseverance, right? So
And those are like literally number one and number
number
two
one,
skills
number
for
one entry.
sourcing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if I couldn't, like, if I didn't know the answer, here's another thing.
You peel back the onion.
Slack channels, or just Slack in general, is
Yep.
just like my favorite thing in a company because you get to interact with people you would never be able to interact with.
Right.
And so I would actually, the way I got sort of elevated the visibility outside of HR, because it's still siloed, man. I mean, I don't know a
Yep.
company that it's not.
That was
I would
Slack.
just post some, updates, competitive intelligence updates, because that's just me. And so all these people kind of saw me interact and contribute back to Cloudera. And so that's how I was able to, like, really connect with a lot of folks if I needed help. And then just FYI, life is not easy sometimes. December of 2022, my whole engineering team got laid off, along with a whole bunch of other folks at Cloudera. It hadn't never happened in such a big number. It was 400 people out of 3,000. That's a lot.
Yeah,
And
and it was the team you were embedded with.
yeah, the whole team.
Right.
And by the way, that team had been an acquisition. So,
Oh
go
my.
I know.
Talk about whiplash.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, so I had that whole period of looking for jobs, and submitting X amount of uh, jobs for the unemployment department.
Yep.
But I was also, thankfully, I'm still pursuing a master's of science in information management at University of Washington. So that kept me busy that way. And then one day in July, the competitive intelligence director at Cloudera kind of remembered me, and he says, I have an opening because one of my team is moving on to another team. One of my team members is going on to another team. Would you be interested? I'm like, yeah. So that's how I got back into Cloudera after being about eight
Downsized.
8 months not with Cloudera.
Hmm.
Um, here's the dots, right? The program management position, the manager decided, I have faith in you. I think you can do it.
We'll
And he
figure
put
it
me in
out.
that role. Same
Right.
with my competitive intelligence director. He goes, I know you've never really done this professionally, but I think you could do it. And so this is key in finding a role,
Yeah, and changing
is
careers is finding someone that believes in you.
believes in
But
exactly.
but in
So
both of those cases, Susie, isn't it true that you had a core skill or a core competency that was necessary in these jobs sure, it wasn't your job title, it wasn't your job description, but there was
Yeah.
something that you knew how to do,
Mm,
that you developed as a sourcer, that became pivotal in these roles. Even though it's, yeah, I get completely different role, but it's almost like if you learn something like mechanical skills really well by deconstructing diesel engines, and you know engine parts really well, you can take that to some other kind of mechanical engineering, engine,
true.
right? So what was that essential skill that sourcing um, produced for you, or that you developed for yourself in sourcing, that then made this essentially possible?
Well, besides the curiosity and the perseverance, I guess
Yeah, but that was
being
already there. That wasn't
that was
sourcing.
already there. I guess uh, better so understanding processes, being super organized, um,
Oh. Mhm.
and being cross collaborative. I mean, just if you just hide in your little area, and it's not going to help your career. I mean, literally, if you
Oh,
can
that's
help,
really interesting. I mean, I
yeah,
get it. So good at
get visibility.
process, definitely. So one thing I've been, you know, all my years doing this, as close to as many as yours. One thing I've always thought was very different between sourcing and recruiting,
Mm,
and part of why I started calling it out as a separate role, back in the um, late '90s and early teens, is because recruiting is very systemic or systems driven. There's a required rigidity in the process of following a specified prescribed sequence,
true.
application, background check,
Mm,
interview, offer. So there you have to follow this system to protect yourself and your company from risk, to make
yeah,
sure that everybody is treated with fairness and equality, and all these other things that are necessary. But sourcing doesn't conform to that. In fact, I would say sourcing is the opposite, in that there really is no formula or system to sourcing. You can't apply the same sourcing technique each time to every job.
true.
There's all these differences. So being um, being able to kind of experiment and iterate with processes is something that sounds like it's key to competitive intelligence. You may not always be able to go to the same places, or and the other thing that you just said is the organization. So again, with sourcing,
Yeah,
you have so many different places that you go.
right.
I, for one, I use Evernote uh,
Yes.
and OneNote, and I've been the reason, by the way, is because some companies that I've worked with do not allow you to use Evernote, and so I have to use OneNote. So it's an environmental thing.
Mm,
But either way, literally they're transferable, and those are that's where I store all my information. Yeah, it
mm.
used to be probably the same with you, maybe spreadsheets, like way back in the day. But that's so you can't. There's so many sources. There's so much information. So I think what you just said is really key. Aside from the ability to find information, and the curiosity, and the perseverance, there's this organization skill,
Mm.
and there's this ability to flex your workflow that is inherent in sourcing, that doesn't come from before. That's something you learn on the job.
Yeah.
Those two things. If you want to get good at it, you have to figure out where did you go, what worked, what didn't work, where are all the different sources, so you can go back to them. You can't
Mm.
just randomly, throw darts at the internet and eventually, find something and then forget about it and do it all over again. You have to organize it and catalog it and all that. That's interesting.
And not only that, it's like, for example, we have a new marketing leadership team. So they are constantly like, we need a response to this, right? That just happened 5 minutes ago.
Hmm.
So you got to be on it. Like, and
Go
it,
find out.
like, go find it now, come back like at the end of the day. That's it. You have to be like, okay, again, organized, time management really helps. Well, in any role, if
Yeah,
I'm
but I
thinking,
think in this case, it's the discernment, right? Like,
hmm,
how easy is it this is I've been very diligent about a disciplined approach to distractions, right? You've probably heard me talk about my sourcing blocks. It I
Yeah.
borrowed it from a time management class that I took. It was like the only thing I took out of that time management class, which was the Pomodoro technique,
Oh
which
yeah.
comes from the Pareto principle.
Hmm.
Bottom line is, it's, you set up your blocks in 25-minute sets and you focus your activity. But the reason I did that is because somewhere along about a third of the way into my career, I found myself, I'm sitting at my desk, fully caffeinated, well rested, and middle of the morning, not after a big meal or anything like that. I'm just sitting there at my desk after a couple of hours of working, and I pass out. I just fall asleep. I'm like, and I'm like, what? Wait a minute. Like, I'm interested in this. I'm excited about this. I want to do this, but I'm bored. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do now? Like, I find no challenge in
Ah,
this. I want to do it and I'm interested. So this sourcing set thing came out of my experimentation with other areas that I might perhaps bring into sourcing. And what happened was, it awakened this knowledge that if you over focus on the same thing
mm,
for too long,
yeah,
it doesn't matter how attentive and interested and awake you zone out.
totally.
And that zoning out is what literally put me to sleep. So I discovered this systemic approach to, right, and now I can do 8 25-minute sets throughout the day and get a lot done. And in between, I switch tasks. So the key is, you don't switch tasks during that 25 minutes, right?
Right.
So they tell you, okay, X, Y, and Z company just announced that they were going to do this. Susie, go figure out where it's happening, who's doing it, what the product line is going to be like, what are the features, etc. And you got the rest of the day. Well, if you sat in front of your computer and stared at it for 6 hours doing the same thing, you would lose track of time and you wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
But I bet if you sit there and you focus for 20, 30 minutes and go, I'm going to go dig into this, then you get an outcome, get a cup of tea or check your email or return a call, then come back and focus on that. And that's, to me, that was what woke me up. It made me realize I can go 12, 14, 20, 30 hours straight if I do sourcing sets, but I can't go 4 hours straight if I'm sitting there doing the same thing over and over again. The
Okay,
mind
I'm
numbing
not that
tediousness
organized.
of it.
I am not that organized. I'm like,
But it's the concept, right?
yeah,
Like, you
yeah,
have these kind of chunks. You chunkify. Is that a
yes.
word? You
That's
chunkify your time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is that also part of? And I'm sure you have, like, you can't disclose it. I'm sure you have a system where you're like, okay, in order to get this information, I must first, like in sourcing, I must first digest the funnel. Like,
Totally.
okay, where
Yeah.
are these people? What first of all, what does the client want? What does the hiring manager really want? Then, where are these people? And then, like, how do I find them? And then, okay, there's three places. I'm gonna go here and get some, and I'm gonna go here, and then I'm gonna put it all into a place to dedupe, and then I'm going to do the outreach. So, like, there is a system to it.
There is, yes.
What is that for competitive intelligence? Is it first I read the news feed, or is it first I go to sort, like, what's that like?
It's not like that. It is ad hoc as it gets, which
And
I
it's
happen to
different
like.
every time.
Oh yeah,
So you
absolutely.
have to be organized.
You have to, otherwise, yeah. I
Otherwise,
mean,
where do you put it all?
exactly. So again, I'm not like, okay, well, this request, I know exactly. I just
Right.
it just comes to me, naturally. So I don't
So
know if
there's a
that's
creativity aspect to it.
it is yes. And by the way, I also when I joined Cloudera, I became a talent researcher. They actually created that role for me after a year that I was a sourcer
Hmm.
because they saw my research skills. They really like that.
Right.
And then I became a talent branding person in addition to talent research. So the fact that
So that's
this is
marketing,
again,
essentially.
it is marketing,
Yeah.
exactly. But the fact that these people, put faith into my various skills because I don't have like I have a lot of different skills. That was also key, and I can't say that that's going to happen everywhere, right? So, um, but yeah, no, this is I like it's very fast paced. You have to be able to tell a story to the C level in very condensed,
Oh, so
like
that's another skill you just pointed to. So it's the synthesis is one part of it, like, what did I get from this? But that's not the same as what you just said. The
no,
synthesis and understanding what the meaning of it is, is A.
Yeah,
B is translating that to the C-suite.
exactly.
And how did
Exactly.
you learn that? Because that, I know that doesn't come with. I've learned that over the years as a senior consultant going in because the
Mhm.
CHRO and the VP of HR
Yeah.
hired me to do something, and I've had to like literally do or die. But that's not something that comes with sourcing. How did you
No.
learn that skill? The interpretation to C-suite skill.
That's a good question. My studies right now are giving me a lot of really
Okay,
good
so that's masters in
information management.
information management. So is that similar to library sciences?
No, because for example, my last class was a business intelligence class, so I
Okay,
got to
okay,
play
okay.
around with Cognos and Power BI and Tableau and things like that. So, but it's similar, but not really. I was thinking of an MLS, and then I'm like, well, maybe get into information management, which I love because I love information and managing it is a good
Right.
thing.
And that's
So,
more information management is more corporate versus academic or
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
for
Okay.
sure, for sure. So, okay, where were we at?
Well, we were at
Okay,
the
presentations. Yeah,
yeah.
I guess, being at Cloudera has been extremely valuable to my career, just learning so many things. Because it's a small company, 3,000 people. So it's kind of scrappy, which I love. It's like, all right, go ahead, do this, and you have to figure it
You
out.
still have that flexibility. Yeah.
Yeah,
Autonomy, flexibility.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's another big plus. Like, treating people like adults is really nice. Trusting.
Yeah, I mean, you get to do that to a certain degree. You know, so I've done a lot of work for the it, three-letter agencies, right? The larger federal organizations,
Oh,
and I've done quite a bit with, projects that are secret, top secret, things like that. I myself don't have a clearance, but you don't need to for these projects because what we're doing is gathering essentially open source information. So what we're finding isn't secret. What they do with it is what's secret, but not what we're finding. And
yeah.
based on what you just said, it kind of makes me think. So there's this level of there's this level of maturity when you work with a startup, and I mean like early stage, first 5 years, before 1,000,
Yeah.
like when I was at Google, it was the pre-IPO, it was a startup. There's a rapid iteration, there's a flexibility, there's an autonomy. I mean, I remember being given a blank check, quite literally, like you buy whatever you need. Then you go to work for a mature organization like Microsoft,
Yeah.
where there's structure and there's mentorship. The plan of, we're actually going to give you a senior member of another team to be your guide in the organization and the culture and all that.
Nice.
Um, and you lose that immediate flexibility because everything is now you have to go through approvals and right. And I had a budget, but I still had there was at Google I had no budget. It was just spend whatever, buy whatever you want. At Microsoft, it's here's your budget, but you can only use it for this,
Yeah.
not that, right? And so there was like all these restraints, and the level of maturity increased. There was a level of maturity in a more established organization where certain childish behaviors were really not tolerated. And then I went into and worked with the government, and that level of maturity it, it doubled again.
Yeah.
Where working in these environments, the accountability and responsibility when they put something on your plate,
Mm.
there's no, are we going to check up and make sure that Shally got his job done? There's an assumption you're going to get it done.
Yeah. Right. That's why they hired you.
Whereas like in the mid-sized large companies, there's almost like a little bit of micromanagement.
Yeah.
you know
For
did
sure.
you meet your quota? Did you meet your deadline? There's always, you know and in the small company there's zero accountability because it's all about the end result. So it's kind of bizarre how the further you get into it, let's just say government is a very large organization, probably the largest employer. I have no idea if that's Walmart or the federal government, probably one or the other. But the
Yeah.
further you get into these large organizations, the more the expectation is that you're going to be self-directed, self-sustaining, and not going to be childish.
Correct.
Do you feel like there's a you're in the middle there, right? So it's an established company, but it's
Mhm.
not a Microsoft. Do you feel like there's definitely a level of maturity that you need to attain professionally in order to be in competitive intelligence. Like, I don't want to say, is this a job for old people? Because that's not what I mean. But what I but I want to say, is this a job for someone who's had some business experience, a variety of job titles, or could you be a sorcerer for 5 years out of college and then go into competitive intelligence? I say
Yes.
no. I say it's a little bit more mature
Oh
than that.
no. I say yes.
You
I
can.
mean,
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
one of the team members that has now left, he came in straight out of college.
Into competitive intelligence.
Yeah. And
And it's not like sourcing. It's not something it's taught in school. I mean, nobody goes to school
exactly.
for competitive intelligence, right?
So if you have a good manager who's going to help you out, I
Okay.
think it's just that mindset, right? You
So
need
you do
to
need the maturity, but it doesn't come with age, is what you're saying.
no, no, absolutely not. I
Okay.
mean, I happen to be have been around the block a while, but that's not a qualification. You
No, I'm just wondering. I'm just exploring this with you because I feel like to be a really good sourcer, there's this fallacy out there. Not to drag you back into sourcing, but there's this fallacy out there that people are sourcers first and then they become recruiters. Like, a sourcer is a recruiter that wants to grow up, to be a recruiter. That's so incorrect. In my
totally
opinion, to be a good sourcer, you have to have been a recruiter or have had experience and exposure to recruiting and know the full life cycle and know that side of the business and prefer the sourcing side, right?
correct.
It's a calling, it's an inherent skill set, it's a core competency, whatever you want to call it, but it drives you into that side of the equation. With competitive intelligence, that curiosity and perseverance, is it also similar? Like, it's you almost have to have this appetite for knowledge
Yes,
beyond
absolutely.
curiosity, beyond
Yeah,
how does this work? Because curiosity, you could have
yeah,
that
yeah.
in engineering. How does this machine work? Let me take it apart, right?
That's why I call myself an information monger. I mean, I can't get enough information.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm just so curious. I'm a
You get
snoop.
you get your
I'm a web
fishmongers, you got your cheesemongers, and you got your information mongers.
yeah, and that's yeah, that's it's interesting. So it really is. I think Glenn Gutmacher and myself we posted a something on LinkedIn. It was really cool. It was what do sourcers do besides sourcing? Like how do they use their skills? I don't know if you've seen that. It was a few years back,
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
we compiled this whole list of
Yeah,
I do forensic and I don't know. I mean, some interesting stuff was being listed. So those people, they'd be great in competitive intelligence because
right.
they're thinking outside the box. They're doing other things. They're not just I'm sorcerer. Period.
I
End
gotta
of story.
find this. Yeah, they're pulling the thread and
Yeah,
yeah,
that's that.
or peeling back the onion or whatever analogy you want to use. Okay.
Very well said, Sally. Source needs a lot of intelligence about the requirements and the company. Okay, just looking at the comments.
Let me post that up here. Yeah. I wanted to go in just slightly different direction if you have a few more minutes
Sure.
for our audience. So we kind of know how you got there. We kind of know this is a very viable transition skill, and if you're interested in it and pursuing, if you want to leave the TA world behind. So we got to that point, but now we're there. What can we go? Bring me backwards. What can we learn from competitive intelligence? What does competitive intelligence have that sourcing should know? Like, are there any? I'm just going to throw it out there. Are there any search engines that you use that are different than ours? Are there any, aside from
Mhm.
Crayon, which sounds like a very fancy piece of software? What else? What have you learned in competitive intelligence that you, in your back of your mind, you're like, wow, would have been really nice if I had this when I was a sorcerer.
Yeah. Besides Crown, um,
Besides Crayon.
I think you guys sorcerers, man, you have all the tools. I don't even know what's going on there anymore, to be honest. So, um, mm, wait. So, one of the things that I did when I was at Deloitte, when there was a lull right before 2008, and
Uh-huh.
we're getting fired and nobody's hiring, and I just went out there and on my own. Again, initiative is another good one.
Mhm. Yeah, right.
Just kind of under the radar. well, not only did I start our Yammer network at Deloitte without really asking permission, but then it became like, they became their Deloitte became Yammer's largest customer because I started with recruiters and sourcers. Let's share information. Who's laying off? All these things, right? And then it snowballed into the whole
Everyone's
company.
honest. Yeah.
And so that I got really interested in who's laying off, like all the companies that are laying off, and kind of compiling and doing these things. Bring back the results of companies that are laying off. Everybody's interested in that. Not these days, I don't think, but back in the day, um, those were people that you would go and try to source, right? So, um, so yeah, again, what's interesting here is I'm working under marketing, which is where I should have been my whole life, I think, because I have been in
Okay.
marketing before.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, talent branding was marketing. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And then product marketing is really cool because you get to interact with the engineers who are actually developing the products, and then the product managers and the product marketers, and then see it all tie together into a new release that gets announced, that gets a new customer, because that's what's cool is you somehow contributing to, maybe not ROI, but possibly, new customers are always good, right? Or retaining customers. So that's the part I like the most is being able to interact with all these different groups and being under marketing, which is way more fun than people in HR. I have to tell you. Sourcers are cool, but
Yeah,
HR
it's the
sometimes
transition skill that we were talking about, so it definitely can be applied. We do touch marketing, um, in sourcing in some ways, especially with the advent of social media and the way that sort of like used to be. People would call social media something separate or different. Nowadays, it's just media. It's kind of all blended together. So there's not like you don't have like a social media sourcer specifically.
right, right, right.
It's now just part of it's kind of all blended into internet, pretty much. Um,
Well, I wanted to ask you what is going on in the sourcing world these days because I don't know. LinkedIn depresses me every day I go in there. It's like,
yeah, no kidding. Yeah,
so what's this?
that's depressing. It's depressing.
Yeah.
It is definitely. Um, People have become in our industry. They have become more addicted to LinkedIn than they ever were to like Monster or Career Builder.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Much more. And so, and all the downside that we saw as that evolved with the dependence on Monster and Career Builder is happening 10 times over. So much so that people have learned to in our industry, they have learned to lie to themselves
Mm.
about the results and the outcomes in order to justify their addiction. So it's kind of like it's kind of like the meth addict using the fact that they have superhuman skills when they're high on meth as an excuse for being high on meth. You know
Okay.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, well, it's not really an addiction because I feel great and I can do so much when it's bizarre. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we've begun a reversal. People are leaving LinkedIn, and more people are not even on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
or have abandoned their profiles and things like that. So those that are kind of addicted to trolling LinkedIn, especially finding the high profile people that have complete profiles and come up in search results, and they're being hit up by every recruiter.
Sure.
It's now become like, if I can't find them on LinkedIn, then they don't exist,
Yeah.
right? Which, I have to say, between you and me and our audience of thousands of people, is really good for me because I get brought in as a consultant very frequently
Nice.
because they've been paying LinkedIn millions of dollars for years and they are not getting results.
Yeah.
And they bring me in and go, "What's wrong? Why can't we? Can you come in and help us figure out where to find these people?" And it's literally anything but LinkedIn. So I, I don't want to seem like I'm complaining because it keeps me it keeps me well employed and keeps me, you know, definitely relevant. But it's detrimental to it's what's the word I'm looking for? Like when you atrophy, it's
Yeah,
atrophy.
yeah. Atrophy. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
atrophy. Recruiters and sourcers are their search muscles are atrophied because all they do is go to linkedin.com, type a keyword and hit enter. And unfortunately, all these other tools that are out there, there's
Mhm.
lots of them, okay?
Mhm.
Like you said, that are social aggregators. They also use LinkedIn data.
Yeah.
And so even if you're like, well, I don't use LinkedIn, I use blank, guess what? They use LinkedIn. So,
Yeah.
we seem to somehow have forgotten as an industry that LinkedIn's number one source of traffic is Google.
Right. That's right. For sure.
So for some reason, we just sort of like don't use Google anymore as an
Hmm.
industry, which
Right.
is, you know, eh, which is kind of unfortunate. I don't know if you remember. I used this analogy when you were at the Spy Museum and we did that
No, it was.
presentation. No, I think I used this analogy there, um, and it really resonates today. It's the exact same thing, but just shifted. So I used to talk about how Google would claim. Remember, I used to work at Google,
Yeah.
and you know, Google would claim that they sold you your car. Let me explain why. They would say that you went on Google and you typed in Mercedes Benz
Mhm.
or what, I don't know what your favorite car, whatever, Tesla or whatever, your favorite car, and then they served you an ad or information that led you to click on that dealership, and then you went to that dealership and you bought that car.
Yeah.
Google would they would claim that they sold you that car. That the only reason you went to that dealership and bought a Mercedes is
Mm.
because you used Google. But
Right.
what they don't say, which is the actual truth of this, is that you bought that Mercedes or you bought that Tesla for some other reason. And that reason may vary. It could be, for example, if you're driven by keeping up with the Joneses, right? You might want to buy the car your neighbor has. So you already knew you wanted a Mercedes. You just went to
Yeah.
Google to find the nearest dealership. So you didn't buy the Mercedes because of Google. You
Mhm.
just used Google as you would have used the yellow pages. It's the same thing.
Right.
You would have
So.
flipped to the yellow pages and got, or maybe you saw an ad on TV, in which case the TV sold you Mercedes,
Mhm.
right? So your neighbor sold you Mercedes, the TV sold your best friend, your mentor, someone else sold you the
Mhm.
Mercedes, and Google was just the way that you found the dealership. But they would go to the dealership and say, if you don't advertise on Google, you won't get any customers because we're the reason that you sell cars. Now apply that to everything else in the world, right?
Yeah.
Apply that to, well, all the things that Google allows you to advertise on. I want you to I know this is going to be controversial. I might catch a lot of slack for this, but I want you to fast forward from this was what Google was saying. You bought that car because you went on Google and we sold you that car. LinkedIn is doing the same thing with candidates. Just think about that for a minute. You hired that candidate because LinkedIn sold you that candidate.
LinkedIn Recruiter.
LinkedIn, period. Doesn't matter, recruiter or whatever. Yeah. LinkedIn will claim that your hires came from LinkedIn when the reality is very different. And I'm not saying, look, you may as well have gone to Google and researched every car and then decided to go get a Mercedes, and maybe Google did sell you that car, but it didn't always sell you that car. In recruiting, you may have actually gone on LinkedIn and searched for jobs and found that job, and LinkedIn helped you get that job. But the reality is that a lot of times someone wants to work for your company, they go on LinkedIn to find you, or you literally are sending them to LinkedIn in order to apply for the job. So they found your website. Think about this. They found your website. They landed on your careers page and it says log in with LinkedIn. So
Yep.
you never ever went to LinkedIn until you actually applied for the job.
Yeah.
Then you went to LinkedIn and now your application is through LinkedIn. LinkedIn says they placed that person. just
Oh,
like Google says they sold that car.
yeah.
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So people say, well, geez, we'd be dead in the water without LinkedIn. Just like dealerships would say we couldn't exist if we didn't advertise on Google. Many of these candidates would have applied for the job if it was something else. They
Mhm.
would have found your company. They would have been referred. How
Yeah.
many, this percentage of people that get referred into an organization sometimes is upwards of 40%. That didn't come from LinkedIn.
No.
Sure, they might have hopped on LinkedIn to research your company, but that's not why they got the job. So we've
Yeah.
essentially gotten so lazy that we depend on the last point of entry as
Mm.
if it was the point of discovery. In other words,
Yeah.
that's the last place they visited before they applied for the job. Therefore, that's where the people are coming from. And so the analogy is it's as if you're just lifting a rock and there's your candidate, right? Oh, I found another candidate. Oh, look, another candidate. Oh, look, another candidate. And someday, what's going to happen is you're going to lift that rock and there's no candidate, and these people are going to say, "We're out of candidates,"
Yeah.
not realizing that those people that are under the rock, they were behind the rock, waiting in line for the rock to come up so they can step forward. They were never under the rock.
Right.
That's just the door that they used to get through. So one day you lift up the rock and the people are gone because they went to another rock or various other rocks or whatever. And we don't know where they go because we're so blind as an industry right now, depending on that one source. Imagine if all competitive intelligence for all organizations was in one place.
No way. Yeah, that would suck.
Right. Well, first of all, it doesn't.
No.
Just like all talent is not on LinkedIn, right?
Right.
You can't depend on LinkedIn for competitive intelligence. It's not the only place that you'll ever get competitive intelligence from. So that's
No.
what's happening with sourcing is it's actually kind of going backwards.
That's a
We're
shame.
becoming more and more dependent on this single source. Even though we think we're going to these 10 other really cool tools, right?
Yeah.
They still are depending on LinkedIn. The other thing that's happening is there's definitely a push towards automation
Yeah.
where I think that was that was really out of reach not that long ago. Automation was I was talking about Microsoft Power Automate 5 years ago, or I don't know exactly, but I've been talking about automation for years. It just was out of reach of most people because you needed a little bit of technical knowledge. You needed to know how some JavaScript or how to inspect a web page's code and things like that. But yeah, now the automation is so much easier to use that um, you don't have to have that. First of all, you don't have to invest the time to learn that and have that technical aptitude. So automation is making our job easier. Unfortunately, we're still dependent on LinkedIn. So if we could solve that problem, then the automation would be a much bigger advantage.
So why was it that like 2 years ago, sources and recruiters, I mean, were hot, 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 right? I was getting pinged left and right. Everybody was. Now, I don't see any sorcerer roles opening or, you know what I'm saying? What's up
Mhm.
with that? Is it because everybody's not hiring and they don't need the sorcerer who they think is maybe expendable? I don't know.
There's a there's an economic principle at play here that is similar to a seesaw or an accordion. You have an expansion and contraction of the industry.
Mm.
Um, and I don't even know why I'm telling you this. You know this from competitive intelligence. There's always an expansion and contraction. Because of COVID, there was so much stopping of hiring slowed down and was blocked, and positions got put on hold, and the pressure built up on the
Mm.
back of the dam holding back that flood, right?
Yeah.
And after COVID was sort of, I don't want to say solved, but people started feeling better about being able to go out, and all of a sudden companies wanted to go back to hiring. Instead of doing the correct thing, which is to plan appropriately, they and iterate, what they did is they knocked down the entire damn wall, and the flood came out and they opened every position that had been on hold for 2 years all at
That's right.
once,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they were not hiring as they I mean, they were hiring a little bit, but not as much as they should. They stopped all hiring, it backed up. Then they opened all hiring, and
Hmm.
now you had to, in order to do that, you had to hire more recruiters.
Yeah.
And so just as they made the mistake of not iterating or not titrating those hires, they also made the mistake of hiring a bunch of recruiters.
Yeah.
And some organizations are more to blame than others, where they hired uh, I want to say thousands, I'm not hundreds, thousands of people with zero experience
Yeah.
to go in and become quote unquote sorcerers, But all those people were doing was following a very prescribed formula of go here, do this, and then do that. So they were essentially low level
Mm,
administrative workers getting paid, close to minimum wage to
right.
quote unquote source the data that had piled up, and they
Right.
had all these applicants. And so now you have these companies with 1,000 sourcers that are calling themselves sourcers, and they're paying them, pretty decent wages. And then these very same companies start collapsing because of the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. And
Yeah.
that's not something that people talk about. The whole Silicon Valley Bank collapse, even though they try to keep it hush hush, other banks collapse. We're seeing some other banks collapsing now. There was you saw the news about the 25 banks that are on the verge of collapsing. And all of that comes from the liquidity of these assets that were evaporated
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
that collapse. So
Crazy.
these pressures created a vacuum. All of these VCs and people with money needed to recapture their earnings. So they started pulling back from the companies that they had invested in.
Yeah.
The very same companies that hired 1,000 recruiters.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, we need our money back. We need, start paying us back. So that made them shrink. And bottom line, 10,000 recruiters or sourcers with 6 months of experience whose previous job was as a bartender or a concierge or whatever other jobs all of a sudden flood the market.
Mhm.
And that's the demand and supply. I mean, Susie, the very basic principle of demand and supply.
Yeah.
Incredibly abundant demand just essentially shut down supply. It's an adjustment. It'll readjust the other way once that settles out, right? So you have like a wave that peaked at the beginning of the pandemic, and then it flooded, and then you had this other wave that peaked and then it flooded. We're at the bottom of that flood, and hopefully the next time around the wave will be smaller, so we're not going to go hyperinflation and all that stuff. That's really what it comes down to. Sorry for the deep analysis, but it's
Oh no, that's
essentially,
good.
I had to hire a sourcer at my previous job in the middle of what you're saying. Everybody was hiring sources. I went out and I posted a job, and I had 700 applications, all at once. And many of these people were asking for exorbitant amounts of money, and they only had 6 months of experience.
Ah, okay. Good luck on that.
Well, yeah, and I was like, wow, what's going on here? And then now, as you said, there's very few jobs out there for sourcers. They're out there. People are, returning to work, but it's a different environment now.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say about this is those people who went to those jobs where they were highly paid, they left their nice job and they went to the high risk job, and then they got laid off. They're part of the problem because they should never have left that other company. They just
Mm,
left for greed, and now they're unemployed and they're asking for that much money again, and nobody's willing to pay for that. The people who stayed at their jobs and they realized this is not a good time to make a switch in the
exactly.
middle of this, and they stayed. Most of them are still working where they were working before. Not all of them. I mean, I was cut. I got laid off. I was
Right.
part
Right.
of that whole thing. So I was one of the unlucky ones, but others stayed. I didn't leave, but I was still affected because of the whole downturn of the industry in Silicon Valley Bank. Long story short, is right now a good time to transition out of sourcing? Yes, anytime is a good time to transition out of sourcing, and competitive intelligence is a really good place to go to, wouldn't you say?
I would say so. Yeah. You can't be a sorcerer all your life. I mean, after a while, it's like, okay, I've done that, and it's like, there. It's not. It's kind of monotonous in the end, right? Especially, it's cool to find people and engage and all that and get a hire, but
But
yeah,
if you don't evolve, you're just doing the same thing over and over and over
yeah,
again.
yeah.
And for sourcers, for people like you and I, we like that change. We like that challenge. And so some people might like the repetitiveness
That's true.
and can do
That's
the same job forever.
yeah,
But our native curiosity, gets to the point where we're like, I want to be doing something else.
yeah. Expand your
So
horizons, man,
for
and
me, it
learn.
was data analysis instead of, for you, it was
There
competitive
you go.
intelligence. For me, it was analysis and things
Data
like that.
analysis, awesome. Yeah, and learn. I mean, take some courses. There's so many good ones, free ones out there that just expand your skills. Get into AI. If you get that down like on your resume or LinkedIn profile, know how to use AI to be productive and efficient. That's a
Yeah,
plus.
productivity, efficiency, do more. Do you recommend this master's? Not this one particular, but you recommend the master's in
I mean,
information?
A master's not going to get me anywhere at this point in my life, but it was more for me. Yes, it's a very good course. One thing I will notice, I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but academia, the stuff you got to study is like 3 years old. I'm like, come on, man. I need to see some, we're talking about cloud computing these days, not, databases. Like, so you know what I'm saying? So that's the only thing. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but I have noticed some of my classes being a little outdated like that. But it, all in all, it's a good experience. It's a good
It's a good
experience.
experience.
You have to get on teams with people you don't know, and this is a big bone of contention for me. Sorry, and then we'll go. Um, Guess what? Guess who does all the work? Me, because most of these folks have come straight out of college into a master's. No, you should get into a
Mhm.
master's if you want a master's after you have some business experience.
Have some experience. That's a good advice. That's good
Oh
advice.
yeah, do not, because I see these people. They don't know what they're doing. They're green. They have no experience yet. So anyway, but so it's very dynamic, the whole thing.
Well,
Yes,
I
we can
always
talk.
have two questions that I ask every guest,
Oh,
and
what
I'm
is
not
it?
going to let you off the hook. Um,
Mm,
so the first of those is, who should be our next guest?
my gosh, I don't know. I mean, you've had so many.
If it's a rebate, it's okay. Also, they may not accept the invitation. So
Oh God, what's the next question? Let me think about that one.
the next question is, what do you want our listeners who tune in over the weekend, which is a majority of them, what do you want them to think about? So I want them to ask themselves a question, not for you to give them an idea, but for them to ask themselves a question. What do you want them to mull on, chew on over the weekend?
Well, I think Betty's got a really good segue. Susie, can you recommend any specific courses on competitive intelligence? Um, I don't have any specific courses in mind, but I know that again, I didn't learn this. I kind of fell into it. Just Google it, see if there's anything out there. Um,
So the question may be, what can you learn?
what can you learn?
What
Yeah,
can
how
you
do
go
you?
out there and teach yourself or learn about competitive
Yeah,
intelligence?
what interests you? You've got to have a little bit of other interest in
What
this,
interests you?
I would think.
Okay.
Um, Even if it's how to, become a horticulturist. I don't know if that's what you like. Um, so yeah, go learn something, man. There's a lot of free stuff out there. And believe me, doing a master's and working is a lot of work, folks, but I did
Yeah.
it. um, okay, so who should we invite next? I'm kind of out of that world. I know you're having Jerry Crispin on, right? Or was he
Yep.
just on? He's coming on. Okay. Have you had Vanessa Rath on?
Yeah.
You have. Okay. Ronnie, you've had. I don't know. I just. Oh, wait a minute. Toby Colshaw?
All right. Good one.
He's a competitive intelligence guy. Talent
Yeah.
intelligence.
Good one.
Yeah. There you go.
Actually, I think I have him. We're connected.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I like everything he posts, and he's super amenable and shares a lot.
Cool. That's a
Sharing.
good one.
That's a good one.
Sharing. Yep.
Share information, man. That's,
Yeah. We've been doing that for a while. Dude, I'm gonna reach out to Toby. That's a good one. I hadn't thought of that one. Well, thank you
cool.
so much for making
Thank
some time
you.
for us today. Hopefully, you're able to still get to your competitive intelligence today with the few
Pouring
hours
of
that have left.
information.
Yep.
Yeah. It's crazy, crazy, but it's all
Thanks
good.
a lot, Susie.
Thank you, Shally. It was a pleasure. I haven't
Yeah.
seen you in a while, so
Awesome.
very happy.
Well, everybody, tune in as you heard here. Tune in next week, June 14th. We have Jerry Crispin on.
Hey, Jerry.
And until then, be kind to yourselves. Bye bye, everybody.